Welcome to the deep dive. We're the ones who sift through the noise so you don't have to. You point us to the source, we pull out the core insights.
And today, thanks to our listener, the learner, we're diving into some really potent material excerpts from Yvon Chouinard's book, The Responsible Company, What We've Learned.
Our mission here is pretty clear.
Yeah.
We want to extract the stuff you can actually use. Insights from this book that apply whether you're running a business, working within one, or just trying to be a more conscious consumer.
Exactly. We'll be looking at practical examples, key ideas, things you can, take away and potentially apply starting today.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The book kicks off with a pretty powerful premise, doesn't it? Chouinard says, we are all still in the earliest stages of learning how what we do for a living both threatens nature and fails to meet our deepest human needs. That's quite a statement to start with.
It is, yeah. It sets a serious tone. But what's interesting is how quickly it pivots. It doesn't just stay there in the problem. It immediately brings up human ingenuity, our moral sense, as the way forward.
Right, there's an optimism there. And the origin story of Patagonia itself is, well, kind of ironic in this context.
Totally. It wasn't founded with this grand green vision, not at all. It was meant to be, I think the quote is, an easy-to-milk cash cow.
Yeah, something simpler than their main climbing gear business. Chouinard called it desk jockey's work in contrast to the 10 hours a day sweat and toil of hammering out pittance.
Desk jockey work. But then came the realization about clothing, specifically cotton, that it could be incredibly damaging environmentally.
That quote, "Who knew then that cotton could be as dirty as coal?" really lands, doesn't it? It underlines how hidden environmental costs can be.
It really does. And it highlights a key takeaway. Any industry needs to look closely at its footprint. Nothing gets a free pass just because it seems cleaner on the surface.
And they're quite humble about it, too. They explicitly say Patagonia isn't meant to be seen as the perfect model.
They frame it more as an example of a journey, how any group can become aware of its responsibilities, environmental, social, and then, crucially, start taking action. It's about that progression.
Which is great for you, the listener, because it means these ideas aren't just for environmental companies.
Exactly. The book draws that comparison, saying Walmart, BP, and Patagonia share like 99% of their genes, metaphorically speaking.
Meaning the basic business skills management, seeing opportunities, dealing with competition, they're universal.
Right, and those same skills can be turned towards becoming more responsible no matter what industry you're in. There's always a starting point.
So how do they start? And how can others? Learning from others seems to be a big theme.
Oh, absolutely. They didn't try to reinvent the wheel entirely. They actually went out and sought advice from some big players, Levi Strauss, Nike, Timberland, The Gap, asking how they handle certain operational things.
That's interesting, learning from the giants.
Yeah, and they were inspired by people like Ray Anderson at Interface, who is a real pioneer in green business. It shows the value of looking outside your own bubble.
And it wasn't just about CEOs talking to CEOs, was it? They mentioned learning about engaging the whole workforce.
Definitely. They reference Jack Stack and Springfield Remanufacturing Company, this idea of participatory control and open book management, sharing the financials involving everyone.
So tapping into the knowledge across the entire company.
Precisely, because good ideas can come from anywhere. And the book links this to broader shifts in work culture, like, Google's 20% time where employees pursue their own projects.
And how that sometimes led to environmental projects almost unexpectedly, like mapping animal migration routes affected by climate change. Pretty cool side effect.
Yeah, it shows how empowering employees can spark innovation in surprising areas. But beyond company culture, there are bigger societal currents pushing this way too.
Like what?
Well, think about things that used to be niche but are now mainstream. Specialty bakers using local grains, organic farms everywhere, health food aisles taking over supermarkets.
Right. And in construction, the LED standards, the green building ratings, they've become pretty standard for new commercial buildings now.
Exactly. And that drives real change, better buildings, lower running costs in the long run. Plus, there's the undeniable pressure of resource costs.
Yeah.
Energy, water. They're getting more expensive.
You can't ignore that on the balance sheet.
Nope. So the book argues almost every company is already, in some small way, part of dismantling the old, wasteful industrial system and building something new.
So the question for you listening is, where does your work fit in? Are you part of the dismantling or the building? Or maybe a bit of both?
That's a good question to ask, because even small choices add up in that larger shift.
Another huge point they make is about transparency and accountability. Things have changed drastically there.
Oh, massively. It's just so much harder for companies to hide bad practices now. Everyone's got a camera, a phone, access to blogs and social media,
Citizen watchdogs, basically.
pretty much. And as a result, you see this proliferation of social and environmental indexes and ratings across industries. Everyone's trying to measure and report on this stuff now, partly because they have to.
And it's not just customers demanding it. Investors are playing a huge role too, right?
A really significant role. Institutional investors, the big funds, are increasingly channeling money towards socially responsible investments, or SRI.
And there's that Harvard Business School study mentioned.
Yeah, showing the SRI funds are actually starting to outperform the broader market long term. That gets attention. It says being responsible isn't just nice, it can actually be good for the bottom line.
Which is a powerful motivator. The book also talks about companies working together on this.
Right, through things like trade associations. They can collaborate to develop better standards, share best practices. It lifts the whole industry.
And we even see companies that maybe had, let's say, a checkered past the book, calls them old villains, now genuinely working on improving. Nike's response to the child labor scandals is a major example.
A very public example of a company forced to change and then seemingly embracing that change over time. We see industry-wide shifts, too.
Like the U.S. dairy industry trying to tackle its environmental impact, or construction embracing AD.
Exactly. LED is a great case. It leads to quantifiable benefits like lower energy bills and better indoor air quality, alongside the environmental pluses. It shows systemic change is possible.
Okay, so shifting focus slightly, the book really drills down on the interconnectedness of business. It's not just about your own four walls.
Not at all. It stresses responsibility for the entire value chain. That means your suppliers, the raw materials, how things are shipped, your dealers, everyone.
And retailers have power too, like
Yeah.
REI influencing Patagonia through its buying choices.
Absolutely. And that statistic they quote is eye-opening. 90% of a product's environmental impact is determined at the design stage.
Wow, 90%. So the decisions made before anything is even manufactured are critical.
Hugely critical.
Yes.
And just as important as external partners are internal ones. Your employees.
It's not just about pay and benefits, is it?
No, it's deeper. It's about earning their trust, their loyalty, their real commitment. People increasingly want their work to align with their values. They want to feel useful, like they're contributing positively.
They don't want to check their conscience at the door when they clock in.
Precisely. That alignment is a huge motivator. Now, the book also touches on the word sustainability. It seems a bit cautious about it.
Yeah. Why lean towards responsible instead?
Well, sustainability implies achieving a perfect balance, taking no more than nature can replace. And the book seems to acknowledge that for many things, we're not there yet. We're still often taking more than can be regenerated.
So responsible is more about the effort.
Kind of. Patagonia's mission includes that line about causing no unnecessary harm, like an industrial Hippocratic oath. Responsible captures that ongoing journey, the continuous effort to reduce harm, even if perfect sustainability is still the ultimate goal.
Which logically leads into the next section, which is a pretty sobering look at the actual environmental crisis we're facing.
Yeah, it doesn't pull punches. It outlines the main ways human activity harms nature. Introducing harmful substances, physically altering environments, and overexploiting resources.
They mentioned the EPA identifying something like 62,000 industrial chemicals, most with limited testing.
Right. And traces of many untested chemicals are found in our own bodies, while linking specific chemicals to specific diseases is often complex.
The rising rates of things like autoimmune disorders and some cancers are mentioned as areas of concern.
Exactly. Though they do give clear examples too, like mercury poisoning from eating too much large predatory fish.
Or the runoff from farms and sewage causing those algal blooms in dead zones in water bodies.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the large-scale alteration of the increase in atmospheric CO2, rising temperatures, melting ice caps. The collapse of the Larsen B ice shelf is used as a dramatic example.
It also talks about the sixth extinction crisis,
Oh.
species disappearing at, what, 1,000 times the normal rate.
Yeah, highlighting iconic species like polar bears, rhinos, tigers, but also threats to amphibians, plants, corals.
Oh.
It's across the board.
And resource depletion, doubling water withdrawals, rivers like the Colorado not reaching the sea, loss of wetlands, coral reefs, mangroves, topsoil.
It's a comprehensive and, frankly, alarming list. And the book makes the crucial point that these impacts hit poorer countries hardest, amplifying existing inequalities.
There's also a critique of globalization in there.
Yeah, describing it as potentially fast, but also stupid, brutal, and imprecise when it focuses solely on extracting resources without considering local impacts or repair. How distant economic power can undermine local communities.
It's a heavy section, but vital context for why corporate responsibility matters so much. Which brings us to how that idea of responsibility has actually evolved.
Right. It wasn't always front and center. The book traces it back the concept of limited liability, giving businesses some protection, then the rise of unions and progressive movements pushing for worker safety and rights.
It paints a picture of the big responsible company of 1960 using IBM or Johnson & Johnson as examples.
Yeah, characteristics like honest accounting, decent pay, though acknowledging it was mostly for men than training, safety, supporting the local town, but still quite hierarchical and, predominantly Western white male leadership.
A very different world. And the last 50 years have seen massive changes.
Huge changes. New laws against discrimination, pollution regulations, then rapid technological shifts disrupting jobs, globalization, and this widening wealth gap, even while the stock market grew.
And the stagnation of middle-class wages, needing two incomes just to tread water.
Exactly. The book even touches on dystopian possibilities with automation potentially shrinking the consumer base that can actually afford to buy things. Plus, the pressure for longer, more intense workdays in many white-collar jobs.
So, against that backdrop, what does a truly responsible company look like today? What are its obligations?
Well, it goes beyond just shareholders. It owes fair treatment, transparency, growth opportunities, and protection to its employees.
And to its customers.
Safe, high-quality, durable, repairable products, honest marketing, no hidden catches.
And fundamentally, to the environment, minimizing harm.
Absolutely. And we're seeing shifts in how this is measured too, the idea of the triple bottom line gaining traction.
Profit, people, planet.
Right. And efforts to actually put a value on natural capital, the services nature provides, though that's complex.
The book also mentions the legal challenges for public companies wanting to invest heavily in social or environmental goals, potentially at the expense of short-term profit.
Yeah, the traditional structure can create conflicts, which is why the emergence of benefit corporations is significant. It provides legal grounding for companies to prioritize a stated social or environmental mission alongside profit.
So looking forward, what does the book predict? What trends should we expect?
Well, continued pressure for living wages, although automation complicates the employment picture. Definitely choosier customers demanding healthy, humanely produced, environmentally sound goods.
And those social and environmental indexes becoming even more influential on buying decisions.
For sure. But it also poses that tough ethical question. Can a company making a harmful product ever be truly responsible, even if it does some good deeds on the side?
Like the landmine manufacturer example. Or companies selling cigarettes, or highly polluting cars, or maybe lobbying against climate science.
Exactly. It quotes Chouinard again. To make a bad product is to do bad business. That's pretty blunt.
It connects to his early skepticism about conventional business advice, too. That line about if I did everything right, I'd go broke.
Yeah, suggesting that sometimes the responsible path requires unconventional thinking, not just following the standard playbook, like the story of the shrunken marker in clothing.
Oh yeah, the tiny change that saved fabric but compromised quality.
Right. The small detail showing how easily ethics can be sidelined for tiny savings. The overall point is that it's a continuous journey. No company is perfect. It's about strategically trying to do less harm while staying healthy as a business.
Which loops back to those simple rules from Daniel Goleman. Know your impacts, favor improvement, share what you learn.
A really practical mantra. And this whole discussion ties deeply into the idea of meaningful work.
How does the book define that? Meaningful work.
Essentially, doing something you love and are good at for a living. But it also emphasizes that this often develops through trial and error, trying different things.
It gives personal examples. Yvon Chouinard preferring physical work. Vincent Stanley preferring keyboard work. We all have different inclinations.
Right. But beyond individual preference, it argues meaningful work often involves collaboration and, crucially, doing the right thing, being part of something ethical.
So Patagonia's efforts towards responsibility actually create meaning for its employees.
That's the argument. That commitment makes the work more engaging, makes people want to stick around, makes the company smarter and more nimble because employees are invested.
It attracts people whose values align, presumably.
Exactly. And doing the right thing, even when it's hard, provides extra motivation. It fosters what the book calls ordinary human excellence.
Can you give some examples from Patagonia's history where this played out?
Sure. Phasing out pidlans for clean climbing was a big one, aligning products with environmental values. Providing on-site childcare had a huge positive impact on employees and the company culture. The commitment to giving 1% to environmental causes.
These weren't just about profit.
No. And their efforts evolved first internal stuff like greener catalogs and buildings, then tackling the supply chain, getting formaldehyde out of clothes, switching to organic cotton, which was a huge undertaking.
The Footprint Chronicles initiative seems key here, too, that transparency push.
Absolutely. Understanding and then sharing the impacts of their products. That story about the factory owner Jeff Stokes saying customers have a right to know how clothes are made, that's powerful.
And their work on labor practices, joining the Fair Labor Association, doing audits.
Yeah, acknowledging the challenges, especially with global supply chains and achieving living wages, but showing a commitment to keep working on it. And partnering with experts like BlueSign for chemical management.
BlueSign helps them manage chemicals across the supply chain, right?
Yeah, it's about minimizing harm from dyes and finishes before problems arise. Then there's the Common Threads initiative with customers, the reduce, repair, reuse, recycle idea.
Now adding reimagine. It involves the customer in the responsibility cycle.
Exactly. The book contrasts this kind of engaged approach with something like factory farming, drawing a parallel to low-input farming that works with nature. It all comes back to our roles: citizen, consumer, producer.
And arguing that our role as producer, our work, often has the biggest potential impact.
And that at Patagonia, the meaning comes directly from that commitment to responsibility to nature and to people.
Okay, so let's get really practical for people listening. What can you do with all this? Where do you start?
Well, the book mentions resources like the Bee Impact Assessment from B Corporation or checklists like Napa Greens for wineries, tools to help you figure out where a company stands.
But what if you're not the CEO? Could you still make a difference?
Absolutely. Fundamental changes often start at the edges. Look for those environmental improvements that also save money. They're the easiest wins, even in companies that aren't fully on board yet. Build from there.
And for the CEOs or leaders listening,
The advice circles back to Goleman. Know your impacts, favor improvement, share what you learn. The suggested approach is pretty straightforward.
1. Get your team involved. Identify the biggest harms and the low-hanging fruit, the easiest fixes.
2. Tackle those first. Get some wins, build momentum.
3. Share everything you learn, internally and externally. Transparency builds trust and encourages more action.
And the book argues this process inevitably makes the organization smarter and more efficient. You might hit resistance, sure.
So start with the undeniable improvements.
Exactly. Find those internal heroes, those surprising allies who want to help, and keep being transparent. It's hard to argue against fixing problems when everyone understands them. As a company learns, responsible action becomes, as the book says, irresistible.
The book also lays out these 5 core elements of a responsible company, starting with the absolute foundation.
Element #1, responsibility to the health of the business, financial stability. You can't do good if you go broke. This underpins everything. It connects back to the triple bottom line and valuing natural capital.
Like Dow Chemical working with the Nature Conservancy to put a price on ecosystem services.
Exactly. Then element #2 is about distribution of ownership and wealth. Thinking about fair compensation, maybe limiting extreme disparities. It mentions Dunbar's number for community cohesion, W.L. Gore limiting plant size.
Element #3 is community, the impact a business has locally.
Element #4 is scale. Questioning if bigger is always better, exploring decentralization.
And element #5 may be the most crucial, responsibility to nature. Acknowledging the economy depends entirely on a healthy planet.
Right. And it encourages tackling both the easy and the hard sustainability challenges. Don't just do the simple stuff.
It stresses collaboration again here, needing external help, like Patagonia working with BlueSign.
And being transparent even with suppliers, like the story with Arvind Mills in India, which led to improvements for them too.
Yeah.
Examining the supply chain isn't just about finding problems. It improves quality, relationships, and customer knowledge.
It really feels like the final message is one of empowerment. That quote, doing the right thing usually emboldens people to do more of the right thing.
It creates a positive cycle. So, wrapping up, the big takeaway is that weaving social and environmental responsibility into your business isn't just charity or PR. It's increasingly smart business, beneficial for the company, for people, for the planet.
The insights here are genuinely actionable, applicable no matter your role or industry.
Definitely.
Which leads us to our final thought for you, our listener, the learner. Now that you've got this deeper dive into responsible business, drawing from Yvon Chouinard's experiences and insights, what's one small but meaningful step you can take starting today, right where you are, to contribute to a more just and sustainable world?
Something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.